My name is Gala. Thanks for coming by today. I am staying in today. It's a snowy day, and I thought what better day than to introduce you to myself. So that's what I'm doing. We are going to go through some questions. I found these online. I've seen some other folks do these before, and I thought I might do them as well. So, why did I start this channel? To talk about books. And I imagine you're here because you like hearing people talking about books. I'm selfish. You're selfish. We all like talking about books, right? I like reading a lot. I have some people, friends, family, folks in my life who love reading as well and who read some things that I read, and it's fun to talk to those people about books, but I don't have a consistent way to really talk with people about the things that I'm reading, and more than anything, this channel is an excuse for me to stand in front of a camera and blab about the things that I love. And if you enjoy this, that's beautiful. Sharing my thoughts with you is part of the experience, and I love to hear what other people think as well about the things I'm reading, about the things you're reading. Please let me know. Next question, what are some fun things that I can bring to Booktube? Well, I'm white, as you can see, and that's very unique and interesting in and of itself. So automatically, right out the gate, we're off to a great start. I'm queer and non-binary. I think that probably has an effect on what I read and the things that I choose to read more than I realize, but it definitely does change my reading taste, and if you're interested in reads of that sphere, I might be the person to come to. And on top of that, I think I read maybe a slightly different catalog, and my reading tastes are maybe a little bit different than other folks who do this sort of thing. I do read popular things. I do read classics. I do read famous books and famous literature and nonfiction as well. But I think some of the things I choose to read may be a little bit more obscure, so maybe you'll find some recommendations from this channel that you may not have found otherwise. On top of that, I'd really love to do some analytical content, really breaking down the books that I'm interested in, why I love them, getting into themes and critical analysis of those works, and really talking through what I find so good about them and what I maybe don't find so good about them. Next question, what am I excited about with this channel? First and foremost, kind of like I said before, talk about books. I just want to talk about books, and anybody who wants to listen, that's super duper cool. And beyond that, I'd really love to connect with other folks who love to read. To meet new people through a love of reading is kind of what I want. And I would love to chat with people in comments and in other places to kind of learn about you and learn what you like to read and see if we like the same things or not. And as a caveat for me, I find video editing very relaxing, very therapeutic, very cathartic, so that's kind of another incentive for me to just sit down and really basically edit a video that I've worked on. Went for the lemon ginger, it's a classic. I did not clean this mug well enough. I think my partner was drinking coffee and it smells awful, but it tastes good. Next question, why do I love reading? It's pleasurable, first and foremost. I enjoy it, I love it. I'm a firm believer that you should read things that you enjoy. You should read for pleasure. And there are different reasons to read, of course, maybe for study, maybe for fun, maybe for a book club, but if you're not enjoying the thing you read, I don't think you should be reading it. What's the point, right? I love learning, I love literature, I love everything about reading. What is there not to love about books? Stories are my favorite things. I love analyzing and dissecting stories, understanding what makes them beautiful, understanding what makes them so good, so not good. Story craft is beautiful to me. I love looking at a story and really understanding what makes it so beautiful. And that applies to not just books, but manga, movies, television, video games. I love a story that is so beautifully crafted that I can't even conceive of it. And I'm also slowly working on my own writing projects, and there's no better way to learn how to write than to read. Next question is, what book or series got me into reading? That is The Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov. I've read this so many times. I spoke about this a little bit in my last video on every book I read in 2024. If you're interested, check that out. I read this when I was 15. I took it out of the library not knowing what I was really getting into, and it's just beautiful. If you haven't read it, please do check it out. And this is kind of a tricky question for me to answer because I've been reading since I was a kid, and I don't even know where I started. But this is the book that really got me to look at books beyond just a thing that I enjoy and more on the lines of how a story is crafted, kind of like I was talking about before. Next question is what I would ask my favorite booktuber if I could ask anything. I'll be straight up, I have only ever watched Emmy. I've never watched any other booktubers before, but I really enjoy her. She's a very cozy and relaxing person to watch. And if I wanted to ask her a question, I would probably just go to her comment section and ask a question, but for the sake of the argument and for the sake of the video, I would ask her what her recommendations are for hiking in Canada. I love hiking and she seems like she gets to some really good spots, so I would want to know what she recommends. Next question is what challenges about Booktube I think will be hardest to overcome? Time, I think. I have a really busy life. It's hard to fit everything in. I'm really motivated to make these videos right now because I just started and I have the gumption to keep going, but I think going forward it may be tricky for me to balance the time of making these with everything else I have going on in my life. On top of that, I think the reason I hesitate to even make these videos in the first place is because every second I spend standing in front of the camera is another second I could be reading myself. So I think I struggle with the idea that I'm getting on camera to talk about these things when I could just keep reading. But I know there's value in this if I get something out of it and if anyone else watching gets something out of it, so I think it's worth it. Next question is, when did you start reading? Like I said earlier, when I was a kid. This is my favorite children's book. This is Goodnight Moon. I love this to death. I still reread it all the time. It's such a good book. Yeah, I've been reading since I was a kid for as long as I can remember. I used to do all of the library summer reading challenges. I used to just read so much for fun. I used to love reading books with my parents, checking out things above my reading level and reading it together with them. Next question is, where do you read? Everywhere, all the time, every chance I get. I try and squeeze a few pages in every single second of the day. If I don't have anything else to do, I'm reading 2 or 3 pages. If I have something else to do but I have a moment of downtime, I'm reading a couple pages. That's just how I get my pages in. I like to make sure I get my daily reading in as much as possible because I like to read a lot of books. I read at work, I read on the couch, I read in bed, I read at the breakfast counter eating my cereal before I go to work in the morning. Anywhere you can imagine. Conversely, I love sitting down to read for a couple hours at a stretch without any interruptions, but I also like to get my pages in where I can because I don't have that time to sit down for a couple hours every single day. Next question is, what kind of books do you like to read? It's a wide variety. I read a lot of fiction, I read a lot of literature. I'm not good with genre, so I'm not going to try and really dissect that. I like sci-fi, I like a little bit of fantasy, I like a lot of classics, I like a lot of writing from indigenous writers in North America. To give a kind of general idea, I love George Eliot. She's one of my favorite writers. She was introduced to me by a high school English teacher who I still appreciate and cherish to this day because he really helped me understand my love for reading at a time where I was just reading nonchalantly or only reading for pleasure in a way that I didn't quite understand. I love Louise Erdrich. She is an indigenous writer writing about families and functionality in a country that has kind of failed her. She also has a family-run bookstore in Minnesota that I've always wanted to go to, and I'm definitely going to go there someday. Jim Harrison, another North American writer writing about family relationships. And then my baby, my bread and butter, my favorite thing in the world, my forever sweetheart is One Piece. I've been reading this for, oh god, like 15 years. It's my favorite thing in the whole wide world. I'll read so many other books, but nothing will ever come past One Piece for me. It's just a beautiful story. It's manga, and I know a lot of people aren't really into manga or into comic books in general and maybe turned off by the style. It's got a really goofy style to it as well. It's a very zany read. It's silly all the time, but it gets serious too. It's one of the best things I've ever read. It's not just that I love it and have nostalgia for it and read the new chapters, it's one of the best stories I've ever read. One particular storyline I would put up there with one of the greatest pieces of writing, period, that I've ever experienced. If you have any interest, I mean, it's beautiful. The way I always recommend it to people, if anyone has interest, is give it 100 chapters, and if you don't like it after 100 chapters, stop reading it because it's not for you. If you like the first 100 chapters, you will love it and you should keep going. If you don't, then it's just not the story for you, and that's okay. But if anyone has any interest, seriously, give it a try. It's a long story. It's very long, but trust me, it's worth it. Last question, what does your book collection look like? I'm gonna save this for another video. I'm gonna do a bookshelf tour at some point, I think. So this is a little bit of a precursor for you in the background and what you're kind of getting to see now, but I'm gonna leave the bookshelf tour for another time. And if you're interested, feel free to come back and check that out. I really appreciate you stopping by and watching, learning a little bit about me. Please do let me know in the comments what you're interested in reading, because I'd love to interact with some fellow readers and just learn a little bit about you too.